The wind never stopped on Dustfall Ridge. It moved slow but steady, like it had all the time in the universe. It carried red dust across the plains and pressed it into everything. Metal, stone, skin. Elias Holt had lived with that wind for 15 years, and he had learned to listen to it the way other people listen to music. That morning, the wind sounded tired. Elias stood beside his rover, tightening a loose panel with a worn tool. The atmospheric stabilizer 3 kilometers north had stopped reporting, and that usually meant sand in the sensors. It was normal work, quiet work, the kind Elias liked. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with hair already gray even though he was not yet old. His face was lined by sun and dust, but his eyes were calm, the kind of calm that came from long years alone. Dustfall Ridge was not a popular place. It was a frontier world, claimed by humans long before the central systems cared enough to remember it existed. No cities, no shining towers, just wide land, thin air, and machines that kept the planet barely friendly to human life. Most people left after a few years. Elias stayed. He finished the repair and wiped his hands on his coat. As he turned back toward the rover, something caught his eye near the old fence line. The fence had been there longer than the stabilizers. It was left over from the first settlers, when people still thought animals would be raised here like on old Earth. Rusted posts, loose wire, no real use anymore. Something moved. Elias narrowed his eyes and walked closer. At first, he thought it was scrap cloth caught on the wire. Then the cloth shifted again. It was a person. A young woman stood tied to the fence, her hands bound in front of her, her back against the metal posts. Her head was lowered, hair falling over her face. Her clothes were dusty and too thin for the cold wind. Elias froze. He did not shout. He did not rush. Years on the frontier had taught him one thing above all others. Move carefully. He approached slowly, keeping his hands open and visible. "Hey," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're safe. I'm here." The girl lifted her head. Her eyes were wide, red from dust and tears. But she was awake. Alive. She did not speak. "That fence isn't holding you very kindly," Elias continued. "Let's get you down." He stepped closer and examined the bindings. Rough cord, too tight. Not done by a machine. Done by a person in a hurry. Elias felt a tight pull in his chest but kept his face calm. "I'm going to cut this," he said. "All right?" She nodded once. He used his tool to slice through the cord, careful not to touch her skin. The wire scraped as she stepped away from the fence, and she swayed on her feet. Before she could fall, Elias stepped forward and steadied her, not grabbing, not pulling, just there. She took a shaky breath. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias nodded. "You're welcome." He offered her a water flask. She hesitated, then drank deeply, hands shaking. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Mara," she said. "I'm Elias." He looked around the empty plain. No other vehicles. No signs of anyone else. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I think so." "Good. My place isn't far." They rode in silence. The rover hummed softly as it crossed the dust flats. Mara sat stiffly in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. Elias did not push her to talk. When they reached the homestead, the sun was low. The building was simple but strong, built from reinforced panels and local stone. Solar wings stretched out behind it like tired arms. Inside, the air was warm. Elias handed her a clean blanket and showed her the wash station. "You can take your time," he said. "Food will be ready when you are." She nodded and disappeared into the small side room. Elias set water to heat and opened a ration pack, adding dried vegetables he had grown himself. As he worked, his mind returned again and again to the fence. People did not leave others tied to fences by accident. When Mara returned, she looked different. Still tired, still shaken but cleaner, more solid, like someone slowly remembering how to stand. They ate quietly at the table. Simple food, simple space. After a while, she spoke. "I'm 18, she said suddenly. as if answering a question he had not asked. Elias nodded. All right. I didn't know where else to go. That's okay. She looked at him, confusion in her eyes. You're not asking anything. He met her gaze. You don't owe me a story. Something in her face softened. That night, Elias showed her the spare room. It had once belonged to a worker who never returned after a supply run. Elias kept it clean anyway. Door locks from the inside, he said. If you need anything, I'll be in the main room. Thank you, she said again. After she closed the door, Elias sat alone at the table. The wind pressed against the walls. But the house held. He thought about the law. Dustfall Ridge was lightly governed. Registration mattered. Unauthorized settlers were flagged. Harboring one could bring fines or worse. Elias looked at the old comm unit on the wall. He did not touch it. The next morning, Mara woke early. The smell of warm bread filled the air. Elias was already up, repairing a small drone. Morning, he said. She hesitated. I can help. He smiled slightly. Later, eat first. They spent the day doing small things. Elias showed her how to clean filters, how to track weather shifts, how to read the sky when sensors failed. Mara listened closely. She asked careful questions. Not about escape. About survival. That evening, they stood outside and watched the stars appear one by one. This place is lonely, she said. Elias considered that. Sometimes. Why do you stay? He looked across the plain. Someone has to. She nodded slowly. Far above them, a faint light moved an orbital system scan. Silent and distant. Mara tensed. Elias noticed. Nothing to worry about, he said calmly. But inside, he knew something important had already changed. The frontier had taken many things from him over the years. Tonight, it had given something back. The morning sun stretched across Dustfall Ridge like liquid gold. It warmed the panels on the homestead and touched the red dust of the plains. Mara woke to the soft hum of the rover parked outside, and the faint smell of toasted rations drifting from the kitchen. She rubbed her eyes and peeked out the small window of her room. The fence where she had been left seemed distant now. Almost unreal. A part of her still felt the tight cord against her wrists, the fear, the loneliness. But it was gone, replaced by the steady calm of Elias's home. Downstairs, Elias was already moving. He hummed a quiet tune as he prepared breakfast. It was a simple meal, scrambled protein cubes mixed with dehydrated vegetables, lightly toasted, but the warmth of the kitchen made it feel special. Morning, Elias said, looking up from the stove. His hair fell into his eyes, but he brushed it back and smiled. Eat first. We'll do chores after. Mara hesitated, then nodded. She joined him at the table, the chair scraping softly against the floor. Do you like it here? Elias asked gently, watching her. Mara chewed slowly. It's quiet, she said. And safe. That's the point, Elias said simply. Quiet is good sometimes. Safe is better. She looked down at her hands. I don't know how to be safe. Elias paused. He considered the small kitchen, the homestead, the endless plains outside. Then he said, You learn. Step by step. Nobody is born knowing everything. After breakfast, Elias handed her a work glove and a small toolkit. Let's start with something simple, he said. The water filters need cleaning. It's not exciting, but it keeps us alive. Mara took the tools with shaking hands. She had never worked with machinery before, but Elias guided her patiently, showing her each step without speaking too much. He let her struggle a little, then corrected her hand movements gently. You have to watch the flow, he said. The filter is old, but it's smart. It knows how to resist if you're too rough. Hours passed in silence, except for the hum of the rover and the distant wind. Mara grew steadier with every turn of a wrench and every careful placement of the filter. For the first time in a long time, she felt capable. By midday, Elias gestured to the small greenhouse. Inside, trays of tiny sprouts glowed under soft artificial lights. These are your responsibility too, he said. If they die, we don't eat well. If we don't eat well, we get tired. And tired is dangerous out here. Mara nodded. She liked the idea of responsibility. It made her feel human again. While she tended the sprouts, Elias worked on an old communications device in the corner. The small screen flickered as he calibrated the signal. Occasionally, he would glance at Mara, then back at the screen, as if trying to measure how much she could understand. "Why do you stay here?" Mara asked suddenly. Without looking up from her plants, Elias paused, wiping a smear of dust from his hands. Someone has to. Someone has to keep the systems running. Keep the lights on. Make sure the settlers have a place to come home to. Not everyone can do it, but someone must. Mara considered this. Is it lonely? Sometimes, he admitted. But lonely isn't always bad. It gives you space to see what matters. She looked around the small room filled with green sprouts, humming machines, and organized tools. Maybe this was what mattered. Later in the afternoon, Mara asked to explore. Elias walked with her to the edge of his property, pointing out the stabilizers, the small wind turbines, and the old fence line. People left this place years ago, Elias explained. But humans are strange. We keep coming back, even to places that seem impossible. Mara looked at the fence, still rusty and crooked. She remembered her own fear there, the cold cords biting into her skin. "Why did someone leave me?" she asked quietly. Elias did not answer immediately. He shook his head slowly. Some people make mistakes. Some people don't know how to be better. You can't fix them all. But you can fix yourself. The wind blew hard, kicking dust into their boots. Mara pulled her jacket tighter. "Can I stay here?" she asked finally, almost afraid of the answer. Elias smiled softly. "Yes. If you want. This place, it's yours as much as mine. Rules are simple. Work, learn, and take care of yourself." Mara nodded, feeling a warmth she had not felt in years. Not just from the sun or the house, but from the first human who had not abandoned her. That evening, they prepared a small dinner together. Mara chopped vegetables under Elias's guidance, learning how to move her hands carefully so she didn't waste food or hurt herself. Elias showed her how to season the rations to make them taste fresh. "You can taste life," he said, handing her a spoon. "Even if it's small. Even if it's the only taste you get for miles." Mara smiled. It was strange, but comforting. After dinner, they sat outside, watching the twin moons rise over the horizon. The air was colder than the plains during the day, but the stars stretched endlessly above them, unbroken by city lights. "Do you ever wonder if anyone else is out here?" Mara asked. "All the time," Elias said. "But out here, it doesn't matter. You find what you need. And sometimes, what you need is right in front of you." Mara thought about that as she hugged her knees to her chest. For years, she had wandered. She had feared every shadow and every human. And now, the fear was still there. But it was softer, manageable. Elias leaned back on his chair and watched her quietly. He had been alone for years, thinking he understood solitude. But now he realized that solitude without purpose was different from quiet with meaning. Mara had brought meaning, not intentionally, just by existing, just by choosing to stay. Over the next days, the routines continued. Mara learned to repair small drones, to check sensor readings, to grow sprouts and cook simple meals. Elias watched, corrected gently, praised rarely but sincerely. Slowly, Mara began to talk more. She told small stories from her past, how she had lived on a transport ship, how she had dreamed of seeing planets outside the core systems. She never mentioned the fence again. Elias never asked. One evening, after a long day of work, Mara asked a question that surprised him. "Do you ever get scared?" He looked at her, then at the vast plains around them. "Of course. But fear isn't weakness. Fear tells you what matters, what you need to protect." Mara considered that. "Then I guess I should learn to be brave." You already are, Elias said. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what you must anyway. That night, Mara slept peacefully for the first time since she could remember. And Elias sat in his chair, listening to the wind outside. Knowing that the frontier was no longer just his burden, someone had arrived, someone human, someone who mattered. And for the first time in a long time, the ridge did not feel lonely at all. The morning on Dustfall Ridge was colder than usual. A thin frost had formed on the metal panels of the homestead, and the wind carried a sharp edge that made Mara pull her jacket tighter. She stepped outside, rubbing her hands together, and spotted Elias already at work, tinkering with the old communications drone. "Morning," she said, her voice still soft from sleep. "Morning," Elias replied without looking up. He adjusted a small panel and tested the signal. The device hummed and blinked as it tried to connect to orbit. Mara watched him. "Do you ever check in with anyone else?" Elias paused and finally looked at her. "Sometimes. Not often. There isn't much to report out here. Most people think this ridge is empty." "Empty?" Mara asked, confused. He shook his head slowly. "It's not empty. Just forgotten." Mara considered that. She remembered the rusted fence, the abandoned homestead, the lonely roads she had walked to survive. "So, people think no one lives here. But they're wrong?" "Yes," Elias said, smiling faintly. "Humans are like that. We survive in places no one expects us to." Before Mara could respond, the drone emitted a sharp series of beeps. The small screen flickered, showing a message. Elias frowned and leaned closer. "Unregistered inhabitant detected," the drone read. "Local compliance audit required." Quote, Mara's stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" Elias took a slow breath. "It means someone from the system is coming. The authorities. They check who lives where. And they do not like surprises." "Where?" Mara looked at him, eyes wide. "They'll take me away?" "Not if we handle it right," he said calmly. "But we must be careful." Elias moved quickly, shutting down non-essential systems and hiding certain sensors. Mara helped him quietly, following his instructions without asking why. "Do you always do this?" she asked. "Not always," he admitted. "But sometimes the system is blind to what matters. And humans find ways to protect each other." Hours later, a small hovering vehicle appeared on the horizon. Its design was familiar, streamlined, silent, official. It approached slowly, scanning the ridge. Mara's heart pounded in her chest. "Stay inside," Elias said. He adjusted the drone to emit a false reading, making the homestead look empty. The hovering vehicle paused near the fence. Its scanner swept the land. Mara could see it through the small window, lights bouncing across the dust and rocks. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then, the lights flickered, and the vehicle slowly moved on. Mara exhaled, relief flooding her. It worked," Elias nodded. "Humans are clever when we need to be." Mara studied him. "You risked everything to protect me." He shrugged. "Not risk. Responsibility. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is what makes humans human." For the first time, Mara understood. Safety was not just a place or a rule. Safety was someone willing to stand by you, even when it was hard. The following days were quieter. The audit had passed without incident, but both Elias and Mara knew it could return. That knowledge brought a strange tension, but also purpose. Mara threw herself into the work of the homestead, repairing drones, checking stabilizers, and maintaining the greenhouse. Elias noticed the change. Mara moved with confidence now, asking questions, making decisions, and learning quickly. One afternoon, she stopped beside him as he adjusted the sensors on the largest stabilizer. "Do you ever regret being out here?" Elias considered the barren plains stretching to the horizon. "Sometimes. But regret doesn't help. You either survive or you do not. And if you survive, you help others survive too. Mara thought about that. She had survived terrible things. She had been left alone, abandoned, afraid. And now, here she was, learning, living, protected. I think I understand, she said finally. Survival isn't just living. It's learning to keep others safe too. Elias smiled faintly. Exactly. As they worked together, Mara noticed something she hadn't before. Small tools left in precise order. Careful markings on panels. The way Elias anticipated what needed fixing before it broke. Every movement was deliberate. Every choice measured. You're very organized, she said. Elias chuckled softly. It's a habit. Years of being alone teach you to respect order. Chaos. Chaos can kill you out here. Mara nodded, thinking about the chaos she had lived through. At least here, there was order. And with order, safety. One evening, as they finished dinner, Mara hesitated before speaking. Elias, why did you save me? You didn't have to. He looked at her for a long moment. I could not leave you there. Humans are strange. We see suffering. And we cannot just walk away. Even if it's dangerous. Even if it costs us something. Mara felt warmth in her chest. She had never known anyone like that. She had never imagined that a human could choose kindness over fear. Action over apathy. The days turned into weeks. Mara grew stronger, faster, and more capable. The homestead, once quiet and empty, became a place of routine and purpose, and with each passing day, she felt more like herself, more human. But the ridge was not yet done testing them. One morning, a faint signal blinked on the comm screen. It was old, weak, but unmistakable. A human voice, long forgotten, crackled through. Elias Holt, Dustfall Ridge, compliance audit pending. Report within 72 hours. Mara's stomach sank. They're coming back. Elias nodded, calm but focused. Yes, but now we are ready. For hours, they prepared. The homestead was shielded, sensors masked, and drones hidden. Every system Elias had repaired or maintained was double-checked. Mara moved beside him, learning not just the work, but the thinking behind it, the strategies, the foresight. By midday, the hovering vehicle appeared again. This time, it was closer, scanning more thoroughly. Lights swept across the homestead, across the greenhouse, across the stabilizers. Mara held her breath. Elias did not. Steady, he said softly. Humans adapt. That is what we do. The vehicle paused near the fence. Its scanner probed the perimeter. For minutes, they watched in tense silence. Then, something unexpected happened. The scanner flickered. The vehicle recalculated. And finally, it moved on, ignoring the homestead entirely. Mara's shoulders slumped with relief. It worked again. Elias nodded, eyes on the horizon. Humans leave traces. Sometimes, those traces help us. Someone set this system long ago, for moments just like this. It waited for us to need it. Mara looked at him, admiration shining in her eyes. You're amazing. He shook his head. Not amazing. Careful. Patient. Observant. That is what humans are when we need to be. Not special because of strength, but because we think. We plan. We protect. The wind blew across the ridge, carrying dust and silence. And in that silence, Mara understood. The frontier was harsh. It was unforgiving. But humans could survive. Not alone. Not by luck, but by choosing to protect each other. By bending rules when needed. By being clever and patient and careful. That night, Mara slept deeply. Her body and mind exhausted but calm. For the first time, she felt truly safe, not just because someone was watching, but because she had learned to survive, to adapt, to help herself and others. Elias sat outside, watching the stars. He thought about the ridge, about the long days and nights, about the fragile human networks that kept life going in the void. Humans were not supposed to be here, not in such a lonely, forgotten place. Yet, somehow, they had made it work, and in the quiet, he realized something important. Survival was not just about keeping machines running, or crops alive, or fences strong. Survival was about being human, and human meant never leaving someone behind. The morning sun rose slowly over Dustfall Ridge, painting the plains with soft golden light. Mara stepped outside, letting the warmth touch her face. For the first time, the wind didn't feel sharp. It felt like it belonged to them, to the homestead, to the quiet life they were building. Elias was already working by the greenhouse. He hummed a low tune as he examined the sensors on the small hydroponic system. The faint smell of soil and sprouts filled the air, mixing with the crisp scent of frost melting in the morning light. "Good morning," Mara said, smiling as she approached. "Morning," Elias replied without looking up. "Ready for today?" Mara nodded. "Yes. What are we doing?" He pointed to a small array of stabilizers on the horizon. "We're checking the outer units. Some of the sensors drifted during last night's windstorm. I want you to try troubleshooting them yourself today." Mara's chest tightened. It was not just a task. It was a test. She had learned to follow instructions, but now Elias wanted her to decide, to think, to lead. She nodded firmly. "I can do it." The trek to the outer stabilizers was longer than usual. Dust kicked up under their boots as the wind swept across the plains. Elias walked beside her but kept his gaze on the horizon, silent and steady. Mara felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but she also felt something new: confidence. When they reached the first stabilizer, Mara examined the sensors carefully. She recalled everything Elias had taught her: how to check the calibration, how to listen to the hum, how to notice small changes in temperature and pressure. "Start here," Elias said. "Walk me through what you see." Mara nodded and spoke clearly, describing the readings. The slight misalignment in one sensor, and the error message blinking on the panel. Elias watched, silent, letting her lead. After she finished, he smiled. "Well done. Now fix it." Her hands moved quickly but carefully. When the repair was done, the sensor hummed steadily, lights steady and green. Mara stepped back, feeling a surge of pride. "You did it," Elias said. "Exactly right." Mara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Step by step," Elias agreed. "But today, you led. That's what matters. Humans survive because we learn, and then we lead. Not everyone gets that chance." They spent the rest of the day checking the stabilizers, Mara growing more confident with each repair. By evening, they returned to the homestead, dust-covered and tired, but satisfied. As they sat down for dinner, Mara hesitated before speaking. "Elias, I've been thinking." He looked up from his plate. "About what?" "I have a choice now, don't I?" Elias nodded slowly. "Yes. You can stay here, or you can go. You can call for relocation, or you can find another place to live. No one can force you." Mara considered that. For years, she had felt trapped by circumstances, left at the mercy of people who did not care. Now, she held a choice in her hands. I want to stay," she said finally. "I want to learn. I want to help. I want to live here, with purpose." Elias smiled, the faintest curve of his lips. "Then stay. You're welcome here. Always." For the next few weeks, Mara became more than a student. She became a partner. Together, they repaired old drones, adjusted stabilizers, and tended the greenhouse. She even began teaching herself small tasks, anticipating problems before they appeared. Elias watched with quiet pride, sometimes offering guidance, sometimes letting her figure things out alone. One evening, they walked to the edge of the ridge, watching the twin moons rise. Mara paused, looking at the horizon. "Elias, what if more people come?" He shrugged, calm as always. Then we help them. That's what humans do. We survive together. We create places where others can live, even when the world seems empty. Mara thought about the fence, about the transport ships she had missed, about the loneliness she had felt. Now, she understood that safety was not just walls or machines. It was purpose. It was community. It was trust. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," Elias admitted. "But it's different now. I have purpose. And I have you." Mara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that humans were strongest, not alone, but together. Not because of tools or machines, but because of courage, patience, and care. Days turned into weeks. One morning, a faint signal blinked on the comm screen, a distress signal from a nearby abandoned settlement. It was weak, almost gone, but it meant someone needed help. Mara looked at Elias. "Should we help them?" Elias nodded. "Of course. Humans survive because we choose to help. Sometimes that choice is dangerous. Sometimes it is small, but it is always worth it." They prepared a rover with supplies and medical kits. Mara double-checked the systems, remembering every lesson Elias had taught her. The journey to the settlement was long, but she felt capable. She was no longer the scared girl tied to a fence. She was someone who could act, who could survive, who could protect. When they arrived, the settlement was quiet. Dust-covered, abandoned buildings, and small machines sat idle, waiting for attention. Mara moved forward confidently, Elias following her lead. They repaired the stabilizers first, bringing power back to the settlement. Then, they activated the small water filtration system. Mara worked alongside Elias, her hands steady and sure. By the end of the day, the settlement was functional again. As they stood outside, watching the lights flicker on, Mara felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to help, and she realized that this was what humans were capable of. Surviving in impossible places, creating order from chaos, and helping each other without asking for reward. Elias smiled at her. "See? Humans are amazing. Not because we are strong or fast, but because we care. We choose to make life better, even when it is hard." Mara nodded. "I understand now. That is why I stayed. That is why I will continue to stay." The wind blew softly across the plains, carrying dust and the faint hum of machines. The homestead, the greenhouse, and the revived settlement stood as proof that humans could thrive even in the loneliest places. That night, as Mara slept, she dreamed of endless plains, of fences, of lonely walks, and of courage. She dreamed of the day she had chosen to stay, of the day she had learned to survive, and of the day she had chosen to help. Elias watched the twin moons from the porch, quiet as always. He thought about the frontier, about the dangers that had come and gone, about the humans who survived not by strength, but by care, and he realized that the ridge was no longer just his place. It was theirs, together. The frontier was harsh, but humans were stronger. Not because of weapons, not because of machines, but because they chose to act, to protect, and to survive. And in that choice, Mara and Elias found something rare: purpose, partnership, and hope. The ridge no longer felt empty. It felt alive. The morning sun rose slowly over Dustfall Ridge, painting the plains with soft light that made the red dust glow like fire. Elias stepped outside, inhaling the crisp air, and looked at the homestead. The place that had been quiet, lonely, and empty for so long now hummed with life. Mara was already awake, tending to the greenhouse. The tiny sprouts stretched toward the light, vibrant and green, growing stronger each day. She hummed softly, remembering how terrified she had once been, tied to a fence, with no one to care for her. Now, she had purpose. Now, she had choice. "Morning," Elias said, walking toward her. "Morning," Mara replied, smiling. "Ready for today?" he asked. Always, she said. The ridge was changing. Since the audit drone had passed weeks ago, other humans had begun to arrive. Not many, just small groups. Wandering settlers looking for a place to survive, but enough to bring hope. Each new arrival was cautious, quiet, but eager. They saw the homestead, the working stabilizers, the greenhouse, and they understood. Elias and Mara greeted each newcomer together. Mara had learned not just the skills of survival, but the patience of teaching. She explained how the stabilizers worked, how to tend the plants, and how to repair drones. She guided people with quiet confidence, not as a commander, but as someone who had learned and wanted to share knowledge. One afternoon, a small rover arrived carrying a family of 3. They had traveled from a distant settlement, their supplies low, their spirits weary. Mara met them first, offering water and food. She guided them to a shelter Elias had prepared. "You're safe here," she said softly. "We will help you get on your feet." The mother nodded, tears in her eyes. "We didn't think anyone would be here." Mara smiled. "Humans survive. We help each other." Elias arrived shortly after, quietly observing Mara's work. He felt a deep pride. The girl who had once been tied to a fence, scared and alone, had become a teacher, a leader, a human in the truest sense. By evening, the settlement hummed with quiet activity. Settlers repaired small machines, tended plants, and shared stories. Mara and Elias walked to the edge of the ridge, watching the twin moons rise. "Look at them," Mara said, gesturing toward the scattered lights of the homestead and the new arrivals. "All of them. Trusting us." Elias nodded. "They're trusting humans. And humans rarely fail when trust is given." Mara thought about her past, the fear, the loneliness, the feeling of being unwanted. She realized that fear had taught her nothing. Choice had taught her everything. Choice to stay, choice to learn, choice to help. And now, that choice had created more choices for others. The next weeks were filled with work. Mara taught newcomers how to repair stabilizers, grow crops in the greenhouse, and keep the homestead running. Elias focused on infrastructure, fixing drones, and guiding Mara when needed. The two of them became a team, not just surviving, but creating a small human outpost in a place that had once been forgotten. One evening, Mara approached Elias as he worked on a drone. "Elias, do you think this place could grow?" He paused, wiping dust from his hands. "It already is, but it depends on humans. We need care, patience, and effort. If people continue to help each other, this place will thrive." Mara nodded. She looked out at the plains, the rising moons, and the quiet hum of the stabilizers. "I think I understand now. The frontier isn't just land. It's people. It's humans choosing to survive together." Elias smiled faintly. "Exactly. And humans can survive anywhere if they care enough." The following day, Mara led a group of settlers to repair a distant stabilizer array. Dust swirled in the wind, but Mara moved confidently, guiding each person, checking each system, and teaching as she went. The settlers began to work with quiet precision, their trust in her growing with every instruction. By evening, the stabilizers hummed steadily, lights blinking green across the ridge. Mara stood beside Elias, looking at the glowing array. "We did it," she said softly. "No," Elias corrected, smiling. "They did it. Humans survive because humans work together. We only guide." Mara felt a warmth in her chest. Elias was right. This was no longer about one person. It was about many humans, creating life in a place that had once been lonely and empty. The ridge continued to change. More settlers arrived, small groups traveling across the dusty plains in search of safety and purpose. Mara welcomed them, teaching them the ways of the homestead, guiding them to the stabilizers, showing them the greenhouse. Each new arrival added strength to the outpost, building a small community of humans who chose to survive together. One morning, A scout arrived from a distant settlement with news. "Your outpost is becoming known," he said. "Others are traveling here for safety. You're building something important." Mara looked at Elias. "It feels alive now. Not just us, but everyone." Elias nodded. "Life grows where humans care. That is our strength." Mara smiled, thinking about how far she had come. She remembered the fence, the fear, the feeling of being abandoned. Now, she had choice, responsibility, and purpose. She had learned to survive. She had learned to help. She had learned what humans were capable of. As the sun set over Dustfall Ridge, Mara and Elias stood together at the edge of the homestead, watching the glowing lights of the settlers' shelters spread across the plains. The twin moons reflected on the dust, casting long shadows, and the wind whispered softly through the stabilizers. "You've changed this place," Elias said quietly. "No," Mara replied. "We have changed it. Together." Elias smiled. He realized the truth in her words. Humans survived because they chose to protect, to guide, and to create. Not because the world was easy, not because it was safe, but because they dared to act, dared to care, dared to be human. The ridge was no longer lonely. It was alive with people, machines, and the quiet hum of survival. It was alive with purpose. Mara turned to Elias. "What now?" He considered the glowing homestead, the scattered settlers, the stabilizers humming in the distance. "Now, we continue. We grow. We help others find their place. Humans survive not alone, but together. And this is just the beginning." Mara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. The frontier had tested them, challenged them, and shaped them, and in return, they had made the frontier theirs, not by taking, but by caring, by choosing, by being human. The night grew darker, but the homestead glowed softly. The settlers worked, the machines hummed, and the twin moons watched over them. Mara stood beside Elias, feeling the warmth of community, purpose, and hope. Dustfall Ridge had been lonely once, but no longer. Humans had arrived. Humans had chosen to survive. Humans had chosen to care. And the frontier had answered back. Elias and Mara watched silently as the ridge became more than land. It became life. It became home.